Okay, awesome. All right. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us today. So it looks like we're gonna have a really great discussion today on the impact of citizen science and hopefully my computer's not freezing in amateur astronomy. Today is day 3 of Black Space Week. And so we're really glad for you all to be joining us here. So we're going to start with some introductions. So my name is Caprice Phillips, and I am the Vice President of Black and Astro, and I'm going to be one of the co-moderators for today. Dakota, you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll introduce.
Yeah, thanks, Caprice. So I'm Dakota Tyler. I guess the school year's over, so now I'm a 4th-year PhD student at UCLA. I study exoplanets, so I'm in the astrophysics department. I study how exoplanets evolve, and I'm a co-director of events for Black and Astro. So I will also be co-moderating, and I'll kick it over to Don Dixon.
Hello, everyone. So first of all, thanks for having me. My name is Don Dixon. I'm a PhD candidate at Vanderbilt University. My primary focus of study is stars, particularly stellar rotation and interacting binaries. And, again, I'm very happy to be here. And, with that, I'll kick it off to Nicole.
Thank you. I am the non-scientist here. I'm an amateur astronomer, but during the day, my full-time job is actually a science reporter at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I'm also the editor of the Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And I've participated in my own share of citizen science, but I went to school for journalism, strong passion for astronomy and science, and I decided I wanted to do that. It took me a long time to get here, but I'm here, and I absolutely love communicating science and astronomy to the public and kind of inspiring that passion for our universe.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for those introduction. So we're going to go ahead and get started with some cool questions for our panelists. Really happy to have them join us. So let's kind of start with the first question of how did you get involved in citizen science or just amateur astronomy or just astronomy in general? I'll kick it off to Nicole. You just spoke last, so we'll go with Dawn. How did you get involved in citizen science or astronomy in general?
Sure, I guess maybe I'll start with the citizen science because I think that's probably also more interesting. But so how I got started with citizen science was a part of my undergrad research. So my advisor at the time had got me involved in something called the Milky Way Project. And basically what the Milky Way Project is it's this cool project where we're trying to map star formation all across the Milky Way, particularly in the plane where you've got a lot of gas and dust and things like that. So there was pretty much 2 major parts of the project. There were to find these things called H2 regions, which are where, stars are born and they ionize the ISM and things like that. And then there was also this effort to classify and categorize these things called bow shock nebulae, which are driven by really massive stars and stellar winds and radiation pressure. And you can see these really cool arcs that kind of glow in the infrared. And so what was done is on the Zooniverse platform, people could participate and actually classify these things and draw drawings and things like that. And we actually use that in the publication and in the research to try to say something about where stars are formed and the nature and morphology of bow shock. So that's kind of how I got started.
Awesome. That's super cool. I work with exoplanets and brown dwarfs, so it's cool hearing that kind of science and everything. So so before we move on to Nicole, I see Dr. Rosa, our other panelist, is here. So I wanted to give a chance to introduce for Dr. Rosa to introduce herself. So Dr. Rosa, are you able to talk and unmute and
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It took me literally 15 minutes to log on. I had to try 2 different computers. You know, when you get that little swirly, oh, that's all I kept seeing.
That's okay. You're here now, so.
On my other computer, because I could just face you instead of having this weird angle. But no, I'm gonna have to use my laptop. That's okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Rosa Castro. I reside here in Sweden. I'm originally from New York, and I'm happy to finally be here. Better late than never, right? So I'm sorry that I came in while you were talking. I don't like being that rude person, but you know how the internet can be.
That's totally okay. Like, yeah, so Dr. Rosa, would you like to say a little bit more about the first question we asked was about how folks got involved in citizen science or amateur astronomy. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, part of the reason I got involved is because I took a course on Udemy. I've been into astrology since astronomy, interesting slip. Since I was a kid, I got introduced to it by a teacher named Dr. Lipsky. And so I've always been curious. And the reason I took this course in astronomy is because it's been years since I did anything. And it was taught by Christopher Impey. I don't know if anybody ever heard of him. He teaches a pretty intense astronomy course on Udemy. And he recommended the Zooniverse. I don't know if anybody, yes, okay, I see heads. And so once I got into it, I started doing all kinds of projects. And one of the projects that I got on was the one that led to the discovery of the brown dwarf in 2017, I believe. So that's how I got, it was purely an amateur thing. I don't have any, my doctorate, by the way, is in psychology. It's not in astronomy or anything like that, but I love science. So I take it where I can, you know, on any topic I can. So my involvement was a pure accident. It was really amateurish. I didn't really enter with any big goal of discovering anything or doing anything other than just checking out the research. And I've done quite a few classifications with this program that they offer. So, yeah, so that's my background.
Thanks for sharing. So I'm Dakota, by the way, nice to meet you. Can you speak a little bit more about you slipped it in a little bit. Your background is in psychology, but you talk a little bit more about your background, because I think most of us are like in the maybe astronomy field or in that regime a little more firmly than you are as a psychologist.
Yeah, well, my doctorate's in industrial psychology, organizational industrial psychology. So there's a lot of research involved. So research is something that interests me. And part of the reason that I started to look at the different projects is because they uncover different types of research material. Part of my reason for looking into research is I'm always looking for new discoveries on human behavior and things of that nature. So that's another reason I also joined, to see what kind of research material was on that. But I ended up doing things in space instead of with human projects, right? So that's part of it. I started out working as a therapist. I'm retired right now, by the way, and that's how I ended up having the time to do the research, mostly because I live in Sweden and I'm retired here. So, but I worked for 40 years as a therapist with people that dealt with mental illness and substance abuse. So that was my background, actually. So astronomy is a pure hobby that I took on. And I hope that it continues for as long as I can participate.
Awesome. That's a really cool transition. People, the universe, you've kind of got, it's like everything covered, really.
I guess you can say that. Yeah, I guess you can say that. I have done a couple of projects in it, but I think the one that got me recognized was the one that actually led to a discovery. So that was, I think, pretty cool, but I'm still at it. I encourage people to join the different programs, and not necessarily for the idea of discovering anything. It's just an interesting field to explore.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing. Nicole, you want to hop into the first question, which the original question was, yeah, how did you get involved in citizen science or astronomy?
Well, my love of astronomy was born out of Voyager when I was 8 years old. Saw the pictures of Saturn. That was it. I was hooked. And I read whatever I could on it as I got older, but I wanted to be an astronomer. I really did, but I was really bad at math. So I was like, well, that's not for me. So I went into journalism because I thought, well, this is what I could do is I could bring my passion for science and space and translate that into, bringing that passion to other people and teaching them about it. That's what really got me into astronomy. But what ended up happening too is along the way, I got interested in astrophotography, for example, and which is a love-hate relationship sometimes, but and it was fascinating to me. And then I did discover Zooniverse, and I thought, look at me, I can actually, contribute to something and contribute to the scientific community. And so I did that. Mine was the one that I was really interested in was Galaxy Zoo. And so that was one way I got involved in citizen science, but I did eventually, it took me a while to become a science reporter. And when I got that job, I thought, well, you know what, I can teach people about this. But it wasn't only about that. It's also joining the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and becoming the editor of the journal, because I get to bring in the articles, the research, papers, etc. And over the years, I've been doing this for, I think it's 11 years as the editor. And it was really important to me to not only to bring these articles that are, the journal was very highbrow. It was very research focused, but one of my big goals was to bring it down and to have it appeal to a broader audience, because that's where it is. And that's where you foster that love of astronomy. And I've written about, citizen science projects and their importance, and people get really excited. So I was able to bring that excitement not only to my daily job, how lucky am I, but also in the side, and share astro photos with the public. And people were absolutely stunned. Not only that just an ordinary non-scientist person could, provide images of our universe, but also that sparks that curiosity. And that was something, and that is something that I strive to bring, and to and more importantly is, so the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada is very white, male oriented, and I really was, most of astronomy is, and I really wanted to bring inclusive voices into that, and I try to do that more as well, and that's including more women, more Black and Indigenous knowledge, and just more diversity in general, and to let people know that really astronomy is for everyone. The sky is for everyone. And I also bring out my telescope. I'm in Toronto, light pollution, but I bring out my telescope and, encourage people to look through it, and just neighbors, and the excitement they get is just so inspiring. And maybe it's a little selfish. It makes me happy. That's me.
Can I say something? I just want to add the fact that you said about when you first got into watching Voyager that you wanted to. I had wanted to be an astronomer. I mean, when I was not just an astronomer, I wanted to be an astronaut. But I'm a lot older than most of you. Back in the 60s, the possibility of a female or a brown female was zilch. So I remember I was in the 5th grade when Dr. Lipsky had shown us all about, and I had said, yeah, I want to be. And all the kids laughed at me. They thought that was the craziest thing that a female could imagine being an astronaut. And I said, you know, you can laugh at me now, but wait and see. I will have the last laugh. So as you know, when the first female went up, I was giggling because I saw that it's possible. And I grew up watching Star Trek. That was my introduction to outer space. So yeah, I'm no old folk here. So yeah, I just had to throw that because I remember the disappointment. And back then it wasn't about me not, I had great grades. I was out there and the skills for it, but there was no guidance towards that education because the possibilities were pretty much limited to white males and usually people from the military. And I did try to join the military, but when I heard that you had to confine to certain regulations, that was not my tea bag. Anyway, so I just had to throw that out there since I recall 1969. So I was there, guys. I was there, and it warms my heart that we're all here having this conversation. That's one thing I wanted, and that's, I guess, the real reason why I started taking astronomy. The real core reason. Thank you.
Yeah, so you both touched on something that I think is sort of like underneath the surface of everything that we do, which is that there hasn't historically been like a strong presence of much diversity at all in, space related fields, which is, kind of explains why we have this organization, Black and Astro, why it's really important to do these sorts of panels so that, people who are interested in this can engage with other people who look like them, who are also interested in this sort of thing. So thanks for sharing. And Nicole, it really resonates with me, making this information relatable and accessible and exciting, because how could you not be excited about anything that we know about the universe? Like, we're in space right now. How is that not insane? Like, this is wild that we're even existing right now, having this Zoom. Let's go ahead and keep moving. Let's go to another question. So could you describe, each of you have, it sounds like different, you kind of got started in different ways and maybe have like a different goals. Could you explain your approach or like your main objective in citizen science? Let's swing around and start with Don.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, I didn't, at least when I first started, I didn't necessarily have an objective. I think it was just sort of a thing where, I thought it was very interesting where you can go on this platform, you can go on Zooniverse, and people from all over the world will help you on this project and you can interact with them and things like that. But what I will say is I do think citizen science is, as some of you might know, I think might play a very big role in astronomy because we're kind of in a very unique age where we get so much data that it's just, it's almost impossible to handle. And I think that kind of opens up a lane for people in the general public to help contribute in whatever way a specific project might need to help contribute to that. So I think now is really the time where, if you're interested in astronomy, where you can actually really contribute to the scientific field in a real way. Because, I just don't think there's enough astronomers for the data we're getting currently. So,
Yeah.
That's true. It seems like asteroids are continuously being found by amateur astronomers. One that got really close to Earth maybe a few months ago. I don't remember what it was called, but Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
asteroid defense, I think, yeah, we could certainly use some more help on that. And, if you're the person that catches the one that, was going to end all life, I'm sure you get a Nobel Prize for that or something. So,
Yeah.
But you don't want to be named. You don't want it to be named after you. That's the only thing.
yeah, that's true. You don't want
What about you, Dr. Rosa? What are your main objectives?
Just call me Rosa. I hate
Okay.
the title. I use it only because I don't know. Well, my objectives were basically to study new subjects. I didn't really have a big agenda other than to take the opportunity to do something that I've always wanted to do, but didn't get a chance to do because I didn't grow up in the right time frame, if you know what I mean. So I basically enjoy the opportunity of touching into different projects. There's so many types of research available that you can spend days and hours just looking through the stuff that they have. So my objective is just to explore. It's very simple. I'm a curious person. I have always been that way since I was a kid. I still got my original microscope because even at home when I was a kid, I did explore things. It's a good thing I didn't grow up in the woods. That's all I have to say. But it was all about learning new things that are not always in the books. They're not always in the internet. It's, so that was my objective, learning.
Yeah. Have you come across anything in studying astronomy that you can make parallels or sort of direct links with your exploration of the human mind as a psychologist?
I would say the different dimensions kind of remind me of the different types of personality nuances, the different dynamics of people. I mean, you can classify behavior in the DSM-5, but it doesn't really match the different personalities that we encounter. You have your groups of people. I don't care how much they divide people into groups. There's still more to be uncovered in the human mind. And one of the things that I like too is neuroscience. I like to explore the brain and how the brain functions. So I tend to look at the brain as a little universe within our heads, full of different highways and connections that kind of remind me a bit of the universe.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I study exoplanets and we talk about large planets or small planets, gas giants, rocky planets, but it's even in our solar system, all of the rocky planets are completely different from one another. The classifications really a bit too simple.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think we'll never finish studying astronomy. I think it's an endless.
Completely agree. So Nicole, you kind of touched on your approach and some of your motivators for citizen science and I guess also science communication, as a science reporter. Do you have any, I guess maybe do you want to expand a little bit more on some of those objectives? It sounds like a part of it is to inspire and garner interest. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, for sure. First, I want to touch on what Rosa said, in which she was describing the different personalities. It just kind of reminded me. I mean, you say exoplanets, I was thinking galaxies. We say, okay, these galaxies, we know this about galaxies, and then something comes up that goes, oh, nope, it's something else. It's completely different. So, or we get new information, and you say that we'll never stop studying the universe, probably not the human mind either, because there is so much to uncover and to dig through. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I started saying, I am not a scientist. Sometimes I say, but I play one on the internet. One of the things is, people have said to me that I bring my passion, very excitable when it comes to space and astronomy. And one of the big things is to relay your research and to relay that in an easy to understand way to the general audience. So, and to bring that sense of curiosity. But one of the things that people have also told me is that because I don't have that scientific background, that I can easily explain it in a different way. And also when I came into it, there was a really big push to teach science communication in academia, right? And that's one of a big thing. So I was really fortunate to come in when you guys weren't doing all that, so that I could kind of bring that knowledge to the public. But the other thing that's really important to me, and I don't know if anybody's ever noticed, and when I write my stories at all, when I talk about my full-time job, is I always also want to bring a bit of humanity to the discovery. I ask you guys, okay, what excited you the most? What, and to help people understand that you guys get just as excited about this stuff as anybody else. So that's one thing. And that's, my full-time job. But also, like I did touch on with the journal, I want to bring science communicators and researchers who are really good at explaining their research. And I have a couple of really great columnists who do a fantastic job, and I'm really excited because he's got time on JWST. And so that is one of the things that is important to me, because and maybe the reason is because I didn't have the science education, the formal education. I tried to get into an astronomy class, I don't know how many times in university, and it was always full, I think because people thought it was an easy course. And I was like, no, it's not. And so that is, I think that's something that inspires me to bring this about, is to bring that excitement, and including like the journal that I have here, like beautiful photos that make people go, I really want to open this up and learn about the Tulip Nebula or whatnot. And in easy, like I said, easy to understand language, because I think I bring a bit of myself in that. I remember when I was reading these things, didn't have the internet, and weekly columns in the newspaper, or running to the library to get a book and learning that. And that's what's really that's what I try to bring to it as well. And I have to say, social media till recently was a great way to do it. And for example, I'll give a really quick example. A few years back, I was talking about astrophotography, and someone had pointed out to me that in the journal, we didn't have a lot of female astrophotographers. I was like, you know what, she's absolutely right. So just, it was a Saturday night, I tweeted out, hey, women astrophotographers, share your astro photos. And it blew up. And my phone just kept going off and off and off. And I was so excited to see these women sharing their astro photos with everyone. And I was very excited to open that to people.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. You kind of touched on something that's really important, and that's whatever it is to be yourself, like whatever that means, bringing that in your presentation of the science, because there's going to be people that resonates with. Like sometimes, it's bringing, speaking about the science in a way where anybody could understand. And sometimes it's speaking about it at a higher level for people who are a little bit more familiar. And the ideas that pop in your head, oh, there's not many women astrophotographers. Like just being comfortable with whatever is you and putting that forward. That's so important. And I'm really glad you said that. And I'm glad that we have like such a sort of a broad range of backgrounds and personalities that are doing this, because yeah, like Black people aren't a monolith. There isn't just like, Black scientists or Black science communicators. So
I want to add to what
Uh-huh.
Nicole said, which is, she's not a scientist, is an observer. That's one of the biggest parts of science. We think that you have to have the lingo and the mathematical skills, but there's different layers to science, and it's not a one road. So don't underestimate your scientific abilities just because you don't have a PhD or you didn't take astrophysics officially in college. Because, you know, back before these college institutions were created, people were studying astronomy without the titles. You know, that's why when you call me Dr. Rosa, whatever, part of me goes, ew, I couldn't, because it's just a title. What gives you knowledge is observation. And the other scientific part is observing data, collecting data. A lot of science work is boring. Let's be real. How many hours have you sat in front of Zoo Universe looking at dots after dots and graphics after graphics? That's observation. That's science. None of it is math. None of it is a special language. Yes, there is a lexicon the scientists use to show off with each other. Let's be real. That's what separates the citizens from the quirky scientists. But that doesn't mean they know more. They have the language, that's it. But you got observational skills. That is science. Sorry, I had to say that because when she said, that. I'm not a scientist, I'm like, hello, citizen scientists.
I love that. An observer. Yeah, just observers of
the first law of science. Mm-hmm. You don't start with an experiment. You have to observe and go, there's a need to create this experiment. And then we have to observe for the results. Then we add the data. Hello.
So that makes me think of something else. You know, when we do get caught up thinking, oh, you know, the math is too difficult, or the language is something that I don't understand, you know, that's like a barrier for a lot of people to even be interested, not even like to pursue as a career, but just to be interested. What types of other like obstacles or challenges would you all say that you've faced in your efforts coming into citizen science? There's maybe helpful for other people that are also interested in, you know, maybe prep them for things to look out for, like ways to navigate. I'll just open it up to anybody that has something to add there.
Well, I think, you know, the main issue is this idea that when you start, you don't really know anything. And I think that bothers a lot of people, but that's kind of how everyone starts. So, you know, I remember when I first started, compared to now, you know, I had no idea what I was doing at all, but, you know, I kind of felt comfortable with that because, you know, my advisor was, you know, kind of giving me positive feedback and saying it's all right and that sort of thing. But if you don't have a certain type of support network, I can imagine that could be a real struggle, right? When you first get started, you might feel like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm just not smart enough to do it, or whatever. But I think really the main thing is once you've put a certain amount of time in, you really do kind of gain the knowledge. And so kind of to build off of what Rosa was speaking to, on the Milky Way project, when people were making all of these classifications, and, you know, I was considered, and I shouldn't say this, but, you know, that's what I was considered, one of the experts, right? I was one of the people who, you know, if you didn't understand something, you would email me or one of the other experts on the team. But there was volunteers that knew more than me about certain phenomena that showed up weirdly in the infrared data and things like that, you know, because they spent more time than I did just playing around in the data. So, you know, I would just say, I think a major hurdle might just be the feeling that you don't know enough to participate, but I think you gain that knowledge from participating, right? So that's the idea.
Yeah, for sure. You know, one of my favorite things to say is that, you know, when you're feeling dumb or confused, you're usually about to learn something new. Like that's the feeling that comes before you learn something, is being very confused about what's going on. Yeah, Nicole, you got your hand up.
Well, Dawn brings up an excellent point. So, I was always interested in astronomy. I didn't get my first telescope until I was 30, though. It was bought to me by my former father-in-law, bought for me. And because he knew how much I loved it, but I didn't have the money to buy it. And so it was great. And then after my divorce, I moved to a location that actually is the biggest telescope in Canada, which is the David Dunlap Observatory. Just moved down the road from it. And I was so thrilled because that's the first time I ever looked through a telescope when I was younger and saw Saturn. And I would walk through there because it had beautiful grounds and everything. And one day I heard someone driving up the drive, honk, honk, honk. And I'm thinking, well, the gate's closed. How is this person coming in? Well, it ended up being an astronomer. And anyway, we ended up talking for a couple hours, and they said, you know what, we're taking it over. We're the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. And I was terrified. He's like, you should join. And I'm like, sorry, I'm Canadian. Royal, you say royal, that's fancy, and it means you got to know everything, right? And so I was like, no. And they said, well, why don't you come and volunteer? And I did, and I volunteered for running the observing programs for the public. And I remember somebody asking me a question. It was a kid actually asking me this question about something. And I was using this Dobsonian telescope that I'd never used a Dobsonian before. And he asked me something and I said, I don't know. And there was this actual sense of relief saying, I don't know. And eventually I did join the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, RASC is what we tend to call it. And from there, I learned so much. I would read the journal. We also had another magazine, unfortunately, that closed recently, Sky News. And again, I was just educating myself more and more, and I could answer those questions. And it was born out of that fear of, I don't know enough. And now, and I think to myself, I think back from then, which is 15 years ago, to now, my knowledge has just absolutely exploded. And I say to this day, that gentleman who came up the road, Paul, I say, thank you, because you absolutely changed my life. Because I don't think, had I joined the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, that I would be where I am today as the author, as the editor. I write books about, an almanac that's for North America about, what to see under the sky. And that's another project that I'm really proud of, because I've had people say, wow, I didn't know all this stuff and it wouldn't, do the things that you're afraid of. And if you don't know something, that's okay. That's why you can learn about it. And I think that's an excellent point that you make.
Yeah, and also, to be fair, kids ask the hardest questions. I've learned that over the years. They ask, the worst, the ones that take forever to explain. So,
Yeah, Rosa, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to piggyback. I remember when I first started taking astronomy that all the names and labels were daunting. There were so many. And no matter how much you learn, you have to understand science is forever expanding. The fact is that what you know today will maybe not apply tomorrow. So if you're worried about how much you know, you're not going to be open to learning new things, because no one knows everything. No one will ever know it, especially when it comes to astronomy. Oh my goodness. I remember when Pluto was a planet. I still think it's a planet. I personally consider it a planet.
Absolutely.
But the point is that things change so much over the years that what you learned yesterday becomes obsolete tomorrow. And it's like words and is forever changing. So I used to teach courses when I worked in the field of addiction and mental health. And there were times that I thought I was super prepared with knowledge and information and all my data. And then somebody would throw a question and I would go, oh, shoot, I have to look that up. I don't know this. And so when you teach people, whether you're teaching astronomy or coping skills or whatever it is, you find from your students that you know nothing. And that's okay. It keeps it fresh. It keeps you alert, and it motivates you to investigate more.
I want to say also, it always changes. That's one of my favorite things about learning about astronomy and sharing that with the public. You know what? We used to think this, but now it's this. And I think a few things that I think about often is that we didn't know about galaxies until 50 years ago, not even. Okay, sorry, 50 years, 100 years ago, not even. And even like I remember growing up and the universe was 11 point something billion years old. And now it's not, it's 13.8. So you're right, it's always evolving. And we think we might know the answer to something. And then suddenly it's like, but wait, there's more. So this is great.
Yeah. And it's not even
There's
always
another
like
door behind that door.
Yeah, and it's not even always a small like niche change in the understanding. When you talk about galaxies, we literally went from thinking that the universe was like static and maybe like infinitely old or something to it expanding in size. So it went from like a small universe to an infinite universe over the course of a couple of years.
Well, think about your expertise. I remember 1992, exoplanet. What? I mean, this is insane. There's so much. I can't wait to see what comes out of this and I think it's so exciting that, I was alive when the first exoplanet was discovered, and I can't wait to find out more and how that is going to change our understanding in major ways.
Yeah, the field that Dakota and I study are like exoplanets, and I think it's cool. Like we went from like this is how systems are structured, like in the solar system, to all of a sudden there's Jupiter like planets next to their stars. They still have the atmospheres like there, and this all happened fairly recently. So I think that is very cool, and I think the power in saying like I don't know, it's what keeps us like having a job. The fact that we don't know, we're trying to figure out these answers. So I think that's very cool. So kind of segueing, this is great discussions. They'll kind of segue into another question. I wanted to ask you all, like, how do you balance your citizen science work or amateur astronomer work, communication with your personal and professional commitments? Like, what strategies have you found effective in managing your time and resources with kind of doing this work? And whoever would like to go first, or
I'll go first. Sorry, Rosa, do you want to go?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I'll be really quick because so one of the things that I've also been doing is writing books, and one of the books that I most recently did was Searching Beyond the Stars, 7 women who are answering space's most difficult questions, of which Ashley is featured in the book. And that took a long time for me to work. It took so long. And it ate up a lot of my time. Then I also have the Night Sky Almanac that, I work on every year. And it is really time consuming. I can't even imagine what it's for you folks with, the research, but, having a full-time job and then also doing these other projects sometimes is not, I don't manage as well. Like I haven't done Zooniverse in a while, which now I'm like, you know what, I have time again. I'm going to start doing that. But it can be, I find it that it can be difficult. And I sometimes spread myself too thin, but also, like I was sitting outside last night thinking I haven't brought my telescope out in a while. Well, unfortunately the skies over Toronto have been pretty bad with the smoke, so it's not a lot of observing opportunities or able to share that with others, but it can be challenging for sure.
I was going to say, I am fortunate, I guess, if you can call it that, that I'm not working full time. I do something on the side as a consultant, but I have the luxury of time. So I don't participate in every single, I mean, I participated in 42 projects already, and I've classified over about 1,600 different projects. But the fact is that I take my time with it. I balance it. I'm not super focused only on astronomy. I do other things. I write, I garden, and I paint, and I do art. So I'm like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I keep it flowing. I don't, and part of it is, like, I'll be very honest, I got into doing the astronomy courses because I had gotten sick. And part of my recovery was to retrain my brain by working on science, working on art and language, and all the things that I do. I had a brain tumor. So that when I say I got sick, I don't want to have anybody guessing, what did she have? And when the brain tumor was removed from the frontal lobe, it caused me memory loss and caused me speech impediments and all kinds of crazy stuff. But because I was lucky enough that I had a very scientific mind, I didn't lose that. And I was able to bring myself back to health. I wrote 2 books. I trained myself because I'm here in Sweden. I couldn't get therapy. So I did my own therapy using my own background. In part of that, ironically, the year that I had the brain surgery is when I discovered the brown dwarf. So I don't know if it was that I became extra, how to say, detail oriented in my search for healing, but so I create balance. I don't have 1-0 focus, but I do find that the whole science has allowed me to understand my own personal journey. I've been able to, you mentioned before, how do I use psychology with astronomy? How do I blend it? I create a blend by realizing that all things are connected. Everything's connected. There's no one path or one project or one thing. That's why I have so many different projects I do. And that's how I embrace life. I don't, stick to one thing, but I'm kind of the Jacqueline of all trades right now.
Yeah, I like that thread of connectivity. Everything we speak about is like discrete. Like you are separate from me, and we're separate from the earth, and the earth is separate from everything else. When ultimately we're all made of the exact same stuff, and everything is literally connected and touching each other. Everything is very connected. That's
Yeah.
a way that I've grown to see things as I've learned more as well. So all of you have talked about Zooniverse, and we got a question from the chat. Could you just like expand on what that is for anybody that doesn't know?
It's one of my favorite platforms because it's got so many wonderful projects, from astronomy to nature to ancient history. If you want to look at ancient scrolls, if you want to check out things like the world of insects or the world of animals or mammals, or astronomy of different levels, exoplanets and all kinds of stuff. It is a great site if you're curious, if you have a scientific craving of any type, and you can participate every day for 15 minutes to 15 hours, how much time you have. There's no limit. It's free and it's wonderful. So I strongly recommend it.
Yeah, so as the time, we've got a few minutes left, and as the time is winding down, I think that's sort of a good leading conversation into what anybody who's interested could do if they want to get involved in citizen science. What sort of advice or avenues would you all suggest that people take?
Well, I just provided a link to the Zooniverse projects, because that is also exactly, it just brings up so many great projects, also climate change can contribute to, things like research about all these incredible things. But there are also projects that aren't necessarily on Zooniverse. One of my favorite is iNaturalist or the Seek app, and you can take pictures of, for example, plants or animals or insects in your area that helps them collect where these animals are located. One of the things I think is probably interesting, especially here in Canada, is that, like, for example, ticks are moving further north, and that's a big problem. So you can help, researchers find out where ticks are spreading or whatever. But honestly, I feel like what Rose said, it is like you pick something, you have an interest, it's probably on Zooniverse. So it's fantastic. And I would suggest people, and you can Google citizen science projects, and you can find things that might appeal to you. I will say something that Rosa said too, like, is to take a break sometimes, because I know when I was doing classifications, like, oh my gosh, my head hurts, I gotta stop, everything's starting to like blend together, to step away. But you could step away and just go to a new project, and that's another thing that is really cool about it.
Juggle several projects at the same, which is what I've done, because after a while of looking at the same screen, you're like, whoa, your eyes cross.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now I'm looking at the Milky Way project, I'm like, oh, I gotta do that.
Yeah, and I guess I'll speak a little bit on that, because I did drop a link in the chat of the current iteration that's basically based on what I was doing previously. So you can actually go in there and look at the bow shock nebulae and actually try to help with the morphology. And if people are interested in the science question, what the science question actually is we're really trying to figure out or characterize the stellar wind that are coming out of these really massive stars. So you have big stars, little stars, but the big ones, they shed a lot of their atmosphere because they're so bright. So their luminosity kind of throws material out, and the gas and dust in the interstellar medium kind of impacts that. And so you can actually use the shape and size and the brightness of that impact to determine how much wind is coming out, the velocity of it, and things like that. So we're trying to understand that. So I put that in the chat. In terms of larger citizen science, I think Zooniverse is a good place to start. I do think Galaxy Zoo came first, and the Zooniverse kind of spawned from that. And most of what Zooniverse is, I think, is classification. So I think that's important to note. But I think it's also very unique in that sense, because classification is, I think, a uniquely difficult problem, because one, you don't necessarily need to understand a lot of math and things like that to do it, but it actually turns out that things that astronomers like to use for large data sets like AI and things like that are actually pretty terrible at it for the most part. So you really do kind of need the human element there. People are trying to figure that out, so it's kind of a back and forth, but ultimately I think for the foreseeable future, citizen science can have a strong presence in the classification end of science and things. So I think Zooniverse is a great start. And also, if you're at an institution, maybe if your institution has resources and things, you could potentially get a start there as well. So, but yeah, I'll stop there.
I just want to say too, I loved when that brown dwarf was found, and when I saw that it was citizen science, like, had contributed to that, I was so excited to see that. And it just goes to show you that you can make a difference.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you something. The way I participated in that, I was half tired. I had finished cooking, and I sat in front of the computer, just started looking. It was 4 of us in this project, 4 citizens. It was not a lot of people. And as I said to people before, I didn't do it expecting anything. I just thought it would be cool to find stuff out there, because I believe there's so much that the eye has not seen yet, and so much that needs to be uncovered. And I look at it as, this is a nice way to contribute to that. And when you mentioned about the climate change. So if you're interested in the environment, if you're interested in nature, if you want to help out in some way, this is an opportunity for people who are always wondering what can they do for the environment other than avoid using certain products. You can actually be part of the classification, part of projects that help expand ways to improve how our relationship with nature, whether it's astronomy or the trees or insects. There's so much. And Don, I know you mentioned that there's other stuff besides Zooniverse. I really would be interested in finding out, because, you know, expansion is part of learning, you know, going outside of the comfort zone. And I would like to check out whatever's out there. Thank you.
Yeah, so I actually misspoke a few minutes ago. We still got 30 minutes left, but so I'm going to go and circle back and hit another question that was in the chat from Laura. What does your favorite project do that makes you feel part of the scientific process?
I would say the discovery of a brown dwarf was cool.
Fair.
I know I keep referring to that, but that was pretty cool when I got that call and goes, guess what, guys? This actually led to something. So it's like, you know, because you can spend a lot of time doing research and observing all kinds of graphs and stuff. And, you know, for long, I mean, part of science is a very patient process. You have to be very patient. You can't just expect something to happen overnight. But when you start something and you're not expecting it and it does happen, it's pretty freaking cool. It's a great feeling. That's all I have to say when somebody goes, oh, you were part of that. It's like, yeah, do you know how hard it is to find those? And then I started to think, I didn't realize it was, I mean, part of me didn't think of how hard, I just did it. But my husband keeps making fun of me because he says I can find anything in real life. So he's not surprised I helped find a brown dwarf. So there you go. Some skills we have work for science, guys. That's one of the things I want to, just when you think that you don't have anything, you might find yourself surprising yourself.
And I put the link to that paper that Rosa is on in the chat for people that might be, I've seen that paper that people might be interested in checking out as well. It's very cool.
It's just because I see myself just, I am an average person. I am not as involved as you guys are in astronomy. So that's why I'm glad that I'm here, because I truly want to encourage people to participate. That's the deal, participate. I mean, if I can do it, trust me, you can do it too.
So here's an interesting question. What tip would you give your younger self, your undergraduate self, or just your younger self, for in an academic sense?
Man, I wish I had gone to the library and asked them how to become an astronaut. That's what I wish. I would have been an astronaut instead of giving. I feel like I gave up a second too soon. That's the only thing that because then again, it was the 60s, folks. No internet. You guys got it so damn easy.
Yeah, I guess I could speak to that a bit. So I would probably say two things. One, funny enough, is just to get better grades. I know that's probably not the best answer. But undergrad really is still, at least in my mind, a competition of grades. I think graduate school is a lot different than that. But in undergrad, almost everything seems to come down to that. But secondly, I would say be very particular about who you surround yourself with in the academic environment, and that can help your grades as well. Because a lot of my struggles, at least initially, was because I was kind of doing a lot of things alone, And so if you're the first person in your family to go to college for STEM or something like that, there's a lot of little things, I mean, countless little things that you wouldn't even think of, but you don't know them because no one has told you like, oh, you need to do this, you need to prepare for that, and you should be talking to this person and things like that. So if you're still, at the very early level, at the undergraduate level, or just coming out of high school, I would say one of the things that you might want to do right away is start building your network, the people where you're going to talk to, the people who are going to keep you on track and point you in the right direction. All the more so if you're like, the first person in your family to attempt something like this. So
I'm the non-professional scientist. So for me, it's funny. It took me, I had terrible grades. So because I shouldn't say that. I had great grades for the things I loved. I was that kind of student where, A's for everything that I loved, and the rest were like, I didn't give it as much attention as I should have. But that being said, it took me 20 years from graduating from journalism school to become the science reporter that I had set out to become when I graduated. So one would be patience, I would say, but also I like thinking that in another universe, I'm a heliophysicist. So I'm okay with, I don't want to regret anything too much, or sell myself short on the accomplishments that I've made thus far. But I say patience and better grades. It's like you said, Donna, it's a very simple thing, but it's the truth.
It's never too late. I got my psychology degree from Fordham in the 80s, but I decided, I became a counselor. I didn't even finish my master's until I was 50. Okay. I was 50 years old when I pursued my master's, because at that point is when I had the money and the time. And then I got my doctorate immediately. I did great. I was like, God, I wish I had done this sooner. I had great grades on both. But you know what? You do it when it's the time to do it. We can beat up ourselves about our missed chances, and we didn't have this guidance, we didn't have this proper mentor. But you know what? Today you do. See, what counts is today. Today, if you want to go and become a physicist, I don't know how old you are, I'm not going to ask you, but go for it now. What's stopping you? Okay, money maybe, but you can still pursue that degree. It's never too late. Hey, I literally got my doctorate at, how old was I, honey? It was after I was 50. I had my doctorate, okay? And am I doing something with it? Nah, that's why I don't even care about the title per se. But the point being, go for it. It's never too late. It's late when you're buried 6 feet under. But other than that, if you can still think, talk, and write, you can actually get another degree. I promise you, it's not too late. And you'll probably do 10 times better today than you would have done when you were in your 20s, because you're doing it out of love and not social obligations.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the things I have thought about it, but one of the things I started doing, because I told you I was terrible at math. I'm older now, and like you said, it's better than when you're 20 and your brain's all over the place and you want to do other things. It's easier to focus, and I am 50, so I will tell you. But one of the things I did was, I thought to myself, well, why do I need to pursue it professionally? Or why do I academically, I should say, why don't I do it on my own? So I started a notebook with different equations in the back for different things. And I found that I could do it. And I think it's exactly what you said, out of love, not out of obligation.
And you know what I think you should do? Pursue math, because it's your nemesis. You know what was my nemesis? Statistics. I used to have nightmares about statistics. And one of the reasons I didn't go back for my master's for so damn long was those stupid statistics, and I aced it. because if it's hard, that's more reasons to do it instead of, hey, easy stuff don't test our brains. They don't push our brains for real.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I
Math.
love,
Get yourself a bunch of math programs and do them.
yeah, I love this thought that you can, you know, when the time's right, or, you know, if you're passionate about something, to pursue it. I think that's also the beauty in like citizen science and like amateur like astronomy is that like if you're like, oh, I don't have this like formal education like in astronomy, like I can still participate like in this science. Like, you know, for example, like my sisters, they're in their 30s now, and she's going back to school, and this was the right time for her to do something like where she loves. So I love that, not beholden to like kind of where you feel like you should be like in your life and what you should be doing. I think those are very beautiful kind of advice. So we have another question from the chat from Princess Rashid. So they asked, have you ever participated in a project on Zooniverse that wasn't well designed well in terms of communicating how to make the classifications? If so, what do you advise in terms of how to proceed if the project is especially interesting to you? So if anybody would like to take that question, I can repeat it or anything, but it's also in the chat. But let me know. Basically, I think the idea is that if there wasn't a project that may not have been like super clear about, you know, what to do, but you're really interested in, like, how do you continue and proceed with something that you really are interested in doing?
I can answer that because I've done a lot of different types of projects. One of them was a handwriting analysis. And that was after a while, I was like, what am I doing? I couldn't figure it out. I was like, and the instructions were like, try to see what you can get. And I was, and I should have asked more questions about it. But because I enjoyed the astronomy a lot more, I said, you know what, I'll put this to the side. I can get back to it. I did it out of curiosity. My curiosity was quenched. I don't, you know, yeah, there are some projects that are a little funky, and if you're allowed to give up on them. I mean, it's your time. It's a free process. You can start and not finish. No one's gonna go, shame on you. And if they do, shame on them for shaming you. You know? But yeah, I have, if you ever look, I don't know if you can see people's profile, but my profile, you can see a couple of projects where the classification was 2, 3. And then you see all the other ones where I did hundreds of classifications. Because when I started that, I realized, okay, I'm in over my head. It's okay. Not every project is for every person.
Would anybody else like to chime in on that question with any experience? Or
I just know that for me, when I started doing it, I was like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? Like, so, you know, and I'd go back and look at it and okay, yes, I have this. But that would be the biggest challenge that I've come across, but not necessarily that the instructions were all, I like think that maybe I was having the problem, not them, but that's been my experience.
Well, I'll say, because I was kind of, you know, on the other end, on the expert end of it, at least for the Milky Way project. One of the things you could do is really just reach out and say your piece to the people who are running it. You know, at least in our case, we were more than happy to engage with the people working on the project. So, you know, I imagine if there seems to be some design flaw or something that's not working right, if the people really care about their project and they want it to work well, they want to know that, so they can make adjustments, or, you know, and do the things to make it easily accessible. So I would just say, you know, if you do see something that looks really interesting, but there's some issues with it, reach out and try to contact the people who created it. And if that doesn't work, then, you know, as Rosa said, you know, just, yeah, move on.
Yeah, a really important thing there to remember is that science is collaborative. Like, there's supposed to be communication flowing both ways. And even to go back to what you were saying earlier, Don, about, you know, finding a support network, having people that you can work with when you're doing problem sets. Like, science is a collaboration. I know we have this like old contrived trope of the scientist that just stays in the basement, this like Isaac Newton thing that just solves everything and invents calculus from scratch. But that's not really what science is about. And that's not really how it's done. There's this constant multi-avenue communication that's going on where we're like working with other people, learning from other people, giving feedback for something that isn't working well or something that could be optimized, which is also why it's good to have a diverse group of people that are thinking about things in different ways. And I also really like, Rosa, what you were saying, what you were pointing out, it's important to not confine yourself by like what age you are or how much time you think something is going to take, because the time is going to pass regardless. Like time isn't going to stop because I feel like in 5 years or 10 years is too long to accomplish something. I know that for me, I used to play football and I didn't have any background in math or anything. And when I decided to do astronomy, I realized that I was going to have to go to school for like 8, 9, 10 years to be able to do this. And that's a long time, but it's now 8, 9 or 10 years later. And I'm like at the other end of that. And if I wouldn't have taken that leap, then I would just, I don't know, be doing something else less exciting, not studying planets.
Yeah, I used to tell a lot of my clients that who were always worried about, well, I don't know this, it takes so much time. Said, if you're going to be here 5 years from now, there you have your assignment for the next 5 years. It's gonna move on. Would you rather get a degree at the end of 5 years or just remember all the shows you watched? Because a lot of people, that's all they do is go home and watch TV after work. So why not put it to good use?
Let's see, do we have any other questions in the chat for our panelists?
I wanted to thank Eliza McDonald to putting out her contact because I love heliophysics and I love the aurora, and I forgot about aurora source. And yeah, it's making me excited, and especially with the eclipse coming next year too. It's true.
Yeah, and has anybody on the panel been to a solar eclipse, the full eclipse?
Well, for the Great American Eclipse, I was deployed as a reporter.
Mhm.
I said, look, we need to book this now because all the hotels are booking out. They didn't listen to me. And so then finally I ended up being deployed to St. Joseph, Missouri. It was close to the max eclipse. It had some of the best weather, and it rained, it thunderstormed, and I was devastated. I did get a peak in the clouds just at max. So I was lucky for that to see it, unfortunately, but it will be passing basically through Lake Ontario next year, April 8th. So I'm really hoping, but I mean, Canada is terrible with clouds. I mean, the Northern US, same thing for during that time of year. So I don't know, maybe I'm going to head down to Texas. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I had a chance to go, I think in 2016. And it's I would encourage everybody to go check that out. It's one of the coolest things that I've ever experienced. You can literally feel the temperature drop like 10 degrees or something like that. The crickets and the insects start chirping. I think they get tricked into thinking that it's nighttime, and then it ends. But really cool. Really cool.
What was fascinating to me was seeing the darkness on the one side, like as it was coming over our side, and you're like, that looks like a sunset. What is happening? It was like really cool. I have to say, even with the clouds, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think was it 2016 or 2017? Because I think I just started grad school.
17, the Great American Eclipse.
Right.
Yeah,
Might have been 2017.
Yeah, no, I remember that. It was really cool. I basically just got to Nashville for starting grad school. But yeah, it's a very unique experience.
It wasn't far from you, because I think I went to go see it in Tennessee or Georgia.
Yeah, I saw it right on the Vanderbilt campus. It was a really good view from there. So I lucked out.
Jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess as we have about 12 minutes left. I thought we kind of touched a little bit on this about like how our amazing panelists like got into citizen science or astronomy, but like how would you like, we kind of asked a similar question, but like what advice would you give to folks that like don't know where to start, whether that's like, I'm interested in astronomy, like do I like go to the library and check these things out? Are there local like events happening that I can go and check things out? Like, you know, do I check out Zooniverse or anything like that might not have like, you know, access to resources and everything? Because I know for myself, when I was younger, I knew I was interested in astronomy, but I didn't know like where to start. My mom saw me looking at the moon, was like, how about you know, pursue this? And so like, you know, what kind of advice like would y'all give to folks that may have limited access or resources to get like into this field or just pursue their interest in it? I think that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I think what I would say, well, you know, it would depend on whether you want to do it professionally or amateur, or if you just want to look at the night sky, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I would tell everyone if they're in the beginning is go to an observatory. That's the first thing I would say, especially one that, you know, is very accessible to the public and has events that you can kind of walk through and see things like that. So I think, you know, if you're at the very start, that's the first thing I would suggest.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Also, because that's kind of where it started with me, and yeah, and one of the other things is because unfortunately with social media, you get some bad information. Just make sure that the information you're getting is correct. Trust reliable sources. Sometimes even news outlets do get things wrong, or I've seen that because not necessarily like reporters don't understand necessarily, like general assignment reporters, for example. But just try to do a search for people like you folks out there who are doing the research and who are good on social media. That's one of the things, you know, Twitter, we all know, has kind of gone downhill with that, but it wasn't that bad for me because I followed people like you. So I had, although unfortunately, that's what happened. A lot of people like you got off Twitter and I was like, but also books. Growing up, there was this prominent Canadian astronomer Terence Dickinson, who wrote a lot of books, Night Watch, and they were beginner books for adults. That's how I got started. You know, I had the simplified night sky charts, looking at them, getting into it. Also, if you can afford it, a pair of binoculars. That's what I did for years and years and years, a pair of binoculars. But absolutely go to an observatory, because that's where I saw Saturn for the first time. I was able to see Comet Shoemaker Levy 9 crash into Jupiter. That was absolutely mind-blowing to me. I saw it at an observatory in Toronto. And yeah, I think it would be get out and also look, there's star parties, you know, they are great. Sometimes like, again, I was intimidated by going to one because again, I thought, oh, these people are gonna have all these fancy telescopes. I had a decent telescope. Now it's much fancier. That's you can get drawn down that hole. Don't get pulled down that telescope hole. But yeah, star parties, some offer, you know, camping, you can stay overnight and you don't need all that much knowledge. Astronomers are more than happy to share their telescope with you, unless they're taking photos, but you know, to go and look and talk and explain, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, I just want to plug right there that there is no amateur astronomer on Earth that isn't like dying for you to ask them questions about anything. They're willing to show you anything that's in the sky that they could possibly see and tell you absolutely everything that you could possibly want to know, and probably much more than you're even interested in knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, something about astronomers, we just can't genetically, I think we can't stop ourselves from going on and on about space. So definitely check
It's
out
so
Star.
amazing. They're
Mhm.
so amazing. You know, I had gotten from here in Sweden, you can see the borealis, and sometimes we actually took pictures this winter that passed on our iPhones. And I got a couple of apps that you could download on your iPhones where you actually trace the night sky and get identifications of the different constellations in real time. That is an app that's so cool. I mean, I can like see sometimes some of the planets naked without a telescope, but when you have that and you could actually identify the constellation, that is such a, so I would say get apps, everything and anything you could imagine is out there. And if you can't find it, somebody else can guide you towards it. Ask what, one thing I think it's important is that people should not be afraid to ask questions, ask for help. If you think somebody knows a little bit more, ask them. And if they don't, they might point you in the right direction. And I think a lot of times people are really gun shy about asking for directions or asking for more information from people. And that's knowledge comes from exploring, and questions help you explore. So go for it. That's my biggest takeaway for people, I
Yeah,
think.
I would say to share those apps with people, because I've done it here where people are like, what is that? And I'm like, well, here's Skyview or Sky Safari, or, you know, some of them, and go, oh, and then the great thing with those apps too is you can tap on it and it'll give you some information about what you're looking at. So yeah, absolutely. Those apps are great. I love when I show people, they're like, what's this? It does this. So yeah.
Oh, I'm looking for my phone. It's right here.
There's even like apps, like I have a whole folder with a whole bunch of apps, but like even like in Canada, that I'm again in Toronto, so it doesn't happen often, but like Aurora Borealis alerts for the Northern Lights. You've got a moon app to see what the phase is it's at. You've got the, again, constellations. I'm trying to like think of all the ones. Oh yeah, like I get updates for every time there's a solar flare. There's a major solar flare. And yeah, there's, oh, Jupiter moons. That's one thing that I love sharing with people, is I tell people to grab a pair of binoculars, and you can watch the moons of Jupiter move throughout night after night. And people are like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, you can see it in action. So, and that helps you identify them. Yeah, so I mean, there's Space Weather, SkyLive, Mars. Oh, one of my favorite ones was the Mars. Curiosity sends images all the time, and it's live, and you can be on another planet. So how amazing is that? So yeah, Rosa's bang on.
Well, Global Observer is one app, and it's from NASA. It says the Global Observer. Then there's the Skyview. The Skyview I love.
Yes, that's a good one too.
Love the Skyview. I actually have one for birds, but I'm not going to just get you distracted with that.
Oh,
and,
go ahead. Sorry.
And then the other one, I think it's Sky and Moon. I can't, so you can actually, it's, yeah, Sky and Moon. So those are two of them. And I think I have another one, but I don't, oh yeah, that's it, Sky and Moon.
And don't forget NASA, because they send, you know, they have the picture of the day, I get my alerts, or, you know, and it gives you all this information. But another thing I wanted to say that people really enjoy is meteor showers, and telling people to get to a dark sky site if they can. August is coming for the Perseids. And also, but the other thing I wanted to say, and I know we're coming up to the end here, but is to manage expectations when you share things with the public. That's a big thing for me. So like people, I see people sharing things about the Lyrids, for example, the meteor shower. I'm like, you know what? Most of us live in a city. We're not going to see the 5 or 10 that it produces in an hour under, you know, your American ZHR. But so like manage expectations when you're sharing things with people. When NEO-wise with a comet. I was looking with binoculars during the pandemic, and these people came out and I could see them. I live across from school. They were looking up. I'm like, "You're looking for the comet, aren't you?" They said, "Yeah." I go, "Listen, I'm going to let you look through my binoculars and clean all that." I go, "It's not going to be as spectacular as the images you see on the internet." And I gave them, they were like, "Really? That's it?" They're like, "I mean, it's cool, but I thought," and so that's a big thing for me, is to manage expectations for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're really coming up right here to the end. I wanted to thank all of our panelists. It's been a really good conversation, and I really hope that everybody watching is just curious, and you know that really the skill set that you need to be involved in citizen science is curiosity. That's really all you need to drive you. You don't need to be a mathematician or have a PhD or anything like that. Really quickly, would everybody want to go around if you have like one last thing that you want to leave our audience with before you go? And if not, that's fine as well.
Well, I guess I'll say whatever you do, enjoy it. Don't be hard on yourself if what you do doesn't produce the results you expect. I think in life, you just got to be being a scientist is about observing and observe it. And don't worry if you don't understand something. Don't worry if you don't have all the knowledge. Part of being born is to learn. Every minute of your life, as you're getting older, you're learning something if you're open to it. So the key is be open and enjoy the wonders of the universe. It's a beautiful place.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rosa. Don, did you want to add something real quick?
No, I just really wanted to say, firstly, thanks for having me. I enjoyed participating. And to those who might participate in space at maybe the amateur level or things like that. I think there's never been a better time for it. So as I said before, I mean, the technology recently has advanced to a point now to where awesome discoveries are made every day. You can't even keep track. So just keep at it, and I think it's a great thing to participate in now.
And I just want to say simple, stay curious, because that's, like you said, part of science and who we are really as a species. And so many things, we are where we are now because of curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Well, yeah, this has been an excellent discussion. Everybody else, stay tuned for the rest of the week. Black in Space Week. We've got tons of stuff. If you want to see what's up on the schedule, make sure you're following Black and Astro. It's all over Twitter. It's all over Instagram. And thank you all again for your time. I hope everybody has a good week.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Here. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.